They watched me as I walked in, early, just before dawn cracked over Lester's café windows. I adjusted the collar of my flannel coat, pulled it closer. Over 50 years of weathered seams, it fit like armor. I took the seat by the window. Black coffee, biscuits, and gravy. The regulars murmured, quiet hellos, routine chatter. Until someone saw the tattoo on my forearm peeking from my sleeve. Prison ink, Travis joked loud enough for half the room. The snickers rippled through the café. I kept my head down, spoon in hand, counting the coffee's swirl. I don't like attention. Not tonight. 5 minutes later, the door opened. In stepped Colonel Jameson, dress blues crisp, medals catching the early sun. He paused at the threshold, took one look at me, then the tattoo. Silent. Then he walked straight to my table. The room hushed, like someone pressed pause. He stood beside me for a long moment, hand over his heart. Then he said, "First Sergeant Strickland." I felt my hand tremble. The title had felt buried. He saluted. I returned it, slow, deliberate, and the café exhaled. Chairs realigned. Cold coffee sat untouched. Travis's smirk froze. The room all but stopped talking. Pride filled the space where mockery had been. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. He sat across, ordered his own coffee. I watched the steam rise between us, simple, powerful. Moments later, the colonel leaned in and whispered, "Proud to see you here, Walt. Welcome home." I swallowed hard. My throat tight. That single gesture, salute, yes, but more, it changed everything. The café didn't just let me stay. It gave me space to stand. I was born on a farm just outside Pikeville, Kentucky, in 1952. Dirt roads, mule-drawn chores, a mother who taught Sunday school and a father who carried quiet grief from the Korean War in the lines of his face. I learned early that duty sat heavier than pride, quieter than words. I joined the Marine Corps in '70, not for fame or medals, I simply felt called. I wanted to stand for something bigger than me. I shipped to Camp Pendleton, then sailed across the Pacific to Vietnam. 2nd Recon Battalion was our unit, ghosts in the early jungle, moving before the sun, disappearing before the dawn. I earned my first stripes patching wounds under fire. The jungle didn't care about rank. I watched PFC Collins limp, bullet through his calf, blood rich and slow. I bandaged him and carried him into the LZ under mortar shelling. The second landing zone collapsed, but I held him until a medevac lifted us both out. There were more like that. Graves in RNR letters sent home. Teletypes of names I never wanted to know. They made me first sergeant by age 26. I wore it as a shield, not a badge. We lost men. Too many. We held each other up while every firefight tore something from the rest of us. A firefight in '73 changed me. We were reconning a hill when an ambush struck. I collapsed to pull one of the men aside when the rocket exploded. The blast threw us both to ground. I felt heat at my shoulder, heard the crack in my chest. I didn't know I was hurt until I saw my blood. I carried him still, dragged him through mud and fire, until we reached the chopper. Only then did I notice my own wound. I mended. Thanks to Ellie Torres, our medic, brave beyond words during the chaos. She stopped the bleeding, stitched the wound, calmed my fear. I never said the words. Didn't need to. But she followed me home. We married in Louisville in '75. I left the Corps in '76. Came back to Pikeville. The flannel coat was waiting. Ellie made biscuits and gravy every morning, our version of homecoming, no banners, no band. We built a life of simple work. I taught school for a few years, then repaired tractors and barns. Ellie became head nurse at the community clinic. But the war never left. I carried the weight of every lost man and every survivor. Some mornings I woke to silence that felt louder than mortars. The tattoo on my forearm, the second recon dagger, flanked by stars, was done in '74, after the ambush. I meant it private, a reminder to myself, not a sign for everyone else to read. At Lester's Café, that coat hid the tattoo for 40 years. Hiding didn't change the pain. It just kept it quiet. Ellie passed in '05. Cancer. I kept her photo in the glove box. Wrote letters I never mailed. Traded tools for quiet. Lester's became my morning place, coffee, biscuits, gravy, company without questions. I thought anonymity would keep the old ghosts at bay. Maybe it did. Until some mornings, the cafe got louder. Tyler's jokes, the laughter. I'd sip slowly and not look over. But that day, the day of the tattoo and the Colonel's arrival, the coat felt thin. But maybe not thin enough. So I sat there, quiet in my flannel and old grief, until someone finally saw me. Lester's Café had a morning rhythm I relied on, the hiss of the coffee machine, the scrape of chairs, the hum of conversation about weather, floods, crops, and grandkids. I always arrived at 6:45, black coffee, biscuits and gravy, no questions asked. Elise, the cook, would nod and I'd flash a grateful smile. The place felt steady. Then Tyler Madsen showed up one morning not long after Ellie passed, lean, polished clean of humility. A retired army captain, he carried some shiny paperwork and a swagger he mistook for courage. He took a booth near the window and began holding court. He spoke loud enough for everyone to hear, about his deployments, his award ceremonies, about the time he risked his career to lead a recruitment initiative in Iraq. He was loud, proud, but empty. He took every chance to remind the room, and especially me, what real service looked like. He'd notice my coat then. His stare followed it like a challenge. It must have taken a week before he broke the surface. "Hey, old-timer," he said one morning, "not here yet. Nice coat. Foggy day, cheap thrift store, I suppose?" Some chuckled. Some looked away. I sipped my coffee more slowly. I didn't rise to it. "But I bet you're a Vietnam vet, right?" Tyler leaned back, pretending. "Or are you one of those conspiracy nuts? You know what? I don't care. Just keep your mystery over there." His words cracked like ice. I didn't speak. I just lowered my gaze, felt the room tighten. The air got thicker. Weeks went on like that. He made it a routine. Every morning he'd come early, glare at my coat, follow the gaggle of veterans who showed up for their coffee. Then the joke started, quiet at first, but louder over time. "Looks like you wrapped yourself in a potato sack this morning, Strickland. You ever thought they'd sew bullets in that coat? Oh, I know what that tattoo stands for. That little dagger? Your gang of bikers?" No one in the room stopped him. Sarah offered me coffee with muscle memory, not solidarity. Dolores served Tyler's usual eggs and bacon, though her smile had turned tight. I began to come later, 7:05, 7:10. Later and later, until I worried no seat would be waiting. The comfort was draining, replaced by caution. One morning, I showed up at 7:20. Half the booths were empty. Tyler had laid out a newspaper photo of Marines standing guard, ostensibly to show his own moment of service. He gestured to it with derision. "That's what it looks like, to really serve," he said. "Not just a tattoo on the forearm and a flannel coat." I sat across. My leg itched. My shirt was tucked too tight. I suppose I looked stiff, maybe angry. He saw it and grinned like he'd drawn blood. "I bet that coat's full of sawdust and lies." I didn't say anything. The room fizzled, like fuel waiting for a match. I felt too tired to flame up. Across the cafe, a teenager, Noah, watched from the counter. He was always sketching something: guns, helmets, American flags. But today, he looked anxious, wrapped in concentration. After Tyler left at 9, I noticed Noah approach me, shirt stained in ink. He slid onto the booth opposite me. "Sir," he said, quiet, respectful. "I drew that tattoo." He pulled out a small, folded piece of paper and slid it across to me. He didn't point it. He let it lie there, folded like a gift. I picked it up. Full of ink and detail: the dagger, the banner, 2nd Recon, Vietnam. Done just like my own. The lines were honest, solid. They matched my forearm. I looked at Noah. He swallowed. "He asked me to draw it," he said. "So he'd know it was real." The words hit differently. The boy was young enough to not remember. He didn't trust me, and he tried to make Tyler see what I carried. And he did it quietly. I folded the sketch back up. "Thank you," I said, and the boy's shoulders relaxed for the first time. But I noticed the room then. The regulars watched us. Some astonished. Some confused. Nobody interrupted. I realized then that it wasn't just Tyler's words keeping people silent. It was fear. The fear of being next. Fear of having your own history ignored. Fear of upsetting the rhythm they'd built. That morning, I left the coat on my seat. Just the coat. No flap. The sketch folded beside it. I left it there like a question. No one spoke. Not even the staff. Later that day, the mayor's office called. "We had a complaint," the city clerk said. "About comments made at the cafe this morning." I paused before responding. "Yes." He said they'd come down harder on public bullying. Not just because I'm a veteran, but because people deserve to be treated with respect. I stood in the silence and let it fill me, like the smell of biscuits and gravy, warm and restorative. But inside, I wondered how many more mornings passed before anything changed. The next morning, I walked into Lester's before dawn again. But this time, the air felt different, heavy with possibility. The chair was waiting with my coat draped over it, and on the table beside my place was the folded sketch from Noah. No note. Just the drawing. I sank into the booth, placed the sketch in front of me, and sighed. Morning light filtered through the windows, cutting angles across the table. It felt gentle. As I sipped, I noticed subtle shifts. Sarah brought coffee to my table herself. Her hands shook slightly, nervous, but steady. Dolores refilled mugs from the urn with a softness that spoke more of apology than routine. Mike unfolded the newspaper without looking at the front page headlines. The room felt quieter, anticipatory. Noah slid onto the booth opposite me, nibbled on a biscuit. He didn't speak. Just waited. I let him. After a few quiet minutes, he cleared his throat. "I did it because I wanted everyone to see." I looked at him. He met my gaze. I nodded. His eyes darted around the cafe, wrinkled faces, worn coats, veteran hats beside cups. He swallowed. I think they believe me now." Noah's words weighed more than I could say. A man came forward then. Middle-aged, face like worn leather, name tag read Earl. He carried a metal folder. He paused at our table and cleared his throat quietly. "Walt, sir," he said, voice respectful. "Mayor sent this overnight." He handed me a letter. I opened it, typed, formal. "On behalf of the city of Brooksville, we extend our official apology for any disrespectful remarks made at public gathering spaces. Effective immediately, we are reviewing public awareness campaign proposals focusing on veteran recognition and environment." Earl folded the letter into the folder and nodded. Then added, "And, the cafe's gonna do something too." I looked at him, he looked at Noah. Then he continued. We noticed. We're gonna put up a wall. Honor veterans. Start with your name, First Sergeant Walt Strickland, USMC, 2nd Recon, Vietnam. Beside that, we'll place that sketch there. And an information plaque, if that's all right. I didn't speak for a moment. I looked at Noah, at the drawing, at Earl, then at my own coffee. That'd be all right, I said. Noah's shoulders shifted. Relief? Pride? On the other side of the cafe, Travis stood. He sat alone, staring at me. I met his eyes and nodded. No words. Just nod. He looked away. Later that day, word came, the colonel planned to return, this time with Marines in dress uniform, to unveil the veteran wall. Lester's would be closed for a few hours. The place buzzing without a beat of my voice. I went home that afternoon with a quiet sense of rightness. Veterans Day dawned crisp and clear. I arrived at Lester's in the late morning, unusual time for me, but for this day, I came with deliberate steps. The cafe door was open early, warm light spilling onto the sidewalk. Inside, a hush greeted me. The honor wall stood near the counter, polished wood, a single photo of me in marine dress blues across from Noah's sketch of the tattoo. Below, a plaque read. First Sergeant Walt Strickland, USMC, 2nd Recon Battalion, Vietnam. I paused at the wall. My hand went to my flannel coat, the tattoo hidden underneath. I remembered the mockery, the quiet rebellion of Noah's confession, the mayor's letter, Earl's words. It had all led here. The door opened again. Colonel Jameson entered, this time flanked by 4 Marines in dress uniform. They filed into the cafe like a silent salute, their boots soft on the floor. The regulars, Sarah, Dolores, Mike, stood and watched. Jameson approached me, brisk and silent. He paused by the wall. Looked at the photos. Then he faced me directly. First Sergeant, he said, voice steady. He tapped the plaque with a gloved hand. We're proud to unveil this in your honor. He stepped back. One of the Marines reached into his uniform pocket and pulled out a folded wreath of small American flags. He set it gently beneath the plaque. Another unfolded a blue cloth banner engraved with an eagle and, in service and sacrifice, and draped it across the top of the wall. The cafe remained still. Then Colonel Jameson nodded. Present arms. He saluted. The Marines mirrored him, salutes crisp and deliberate. I stood and returned the salute. It felt like water and long loss washing through me. My chin trembled. When we lowered our hands, there was a moment of silence so deep I felt it in my chest, like a heartbeat in the quiet. Then Sarah stepped forward and offered me a coffee cup. No biscuit, just coffee, perfect and careful. Thank you, I said. Quiet but full. The room exhaled. A single click of change. Noah emerged beside me, shoulders back. He laid his hand on the sketch. Mr. Strickland. I'm proud of you. I swallowed. And I'm proud of you, I said, believing it. Tyler Madsen stood near the door. I'd expected tension. Instead, he looked at me with stale eyes that softened as the chapel quiet wore off. He stepped forward, cleared his throat, and said, Walt. First Sergeant. I owe you an apology. For everything. I nodded. Sit with us. He blinked, shrugged like a man shedding armor, and joined the group at the counter. Later, the colonel and his Marines left. They shook my hand. Quiet. No fanfare. One paused at the door. He looked back and said, Thank you for carrying us home, Sergeant. At my booth, Sarah placed a fresh biscuit and gravy. Mike refilled my coffee. Noah sketched quietly in his notebook. And the tattoo wall glowed with afternoon light. It was more than a tribute. It was a promise, for the next man who walked in quiet, under whispered scorn. That he wouldn't walk alone. I returned to Lester's the day after the unveiling. The morning light slanted through the windows, illuminating the honor wall. Noah's drawing and my photo glowed softly, like a promise newly kept. I took my usual seat, this time with a quiet swell in my chest. The café hummed gently, warmer than it had in years. Sarah arrived with my coffee, black, no sugar, as if we were back to routine, but there was something different in her hand. A small framed photo of me and Ellie, standing under blooms at our wedding. She set it near my cup. "We thought it belonged next to you," she said, eyes glistening. I nodded. Dolores slid my biscuits and gravy across. Then she stayed by the table, watching me with a kind of reverent urgency, ready to step back if I flinched. We both took deep breaths. Mike tapped the table. "Thought you might want to know," he said, voice low. "Someone started a veterans' prayer night at the chapel. They mentioned your speech, about quiet courage." My speech. I'd only said 2 sentences. Quietly. Yet it had found a voice of its own. I looked across the room. Tyler was filling sugar, hesitated, and smiled at me. No words. No presumption. Just a nod. Noah came in behind him, coat zipped to the neck. He looked different, confident. He waved stiffly, sat across from me, flipping open his notebook. He'd started drawing again. This time, not the tattoo, but the wall, no plaque yet, but the outline of wood, flag ribbons, maybe a coffee cup. He drew quietly, attentively. "Thought you might add something," he said, pointing to a corner of the sketch. I leaned in. Pencil tip near a space, empty. I understood the invitation. I reached down under my coat. Pulled out another small, faded photograph, me, Ellie, and Ellie's combat medic uniform. Taken at Fort Ord in '73. I laid it on the table. Noah picked it up. Studied it. She was brave, too. I smiled. Bravest of us. He set it beside his sketch. Then he asked, "Can I draw her, too?" I nodded. They sat together as I ate, 2 generations bridging the years. While the café hummed quietly. Later, the mayor arrived, coffee in hand. He stood by the honor wall and looked at the framed photo of Ellie. Then at me. "Sir," he said softly. "We've designated the web page for the town. It now includes profiles of each man and woman on that wall. We'd like to include her, too. And your story. Your chapel moment." I nodded again. It wasn't fame. It was memory, shared, preserved. Tyler came and stood beside him. He put an arm around my shoulder, no ceremony, just understanding. I didn't step away. I allowed it. When I left later, the sun was high, and the day felt whole. I walked slowly, cane steady. I felt anchored, not by medals, not by mockery, but by community. At home, I placed Noah's sketches in a binder, today's, yesterday's, alongside Ellie's photo. I closed the cover gently, slid it onto the shelf with the military frame tea-light lamp, beside Clara's Bible. That night, I sat on the porch, coat hung over the chair back. I watched streetlights through the trees. Heard distant laughter from the chapel. I thought of Ellie's voice, of Noah's first words of understanding, of Tyler's apology, of Sarah's photo, Mike's chapel news, and the mayor's honor. The wall wasn't just wood and names. It was a living promise, that a tattoo, a coat, a photograph, quiet things, could carry loud truths. And that people could change. From mocking me to listening. From ignoring to honoring. From indifferent to invested in my story and Ellie's. I looked at the empty chair beside me, the porch light flickering. I took a sip of water, closed my eyes, and let the quiet swell, like gratitude, not grief, filling the night. True respect doesn't roar, it arrives in quiet recognition. A simple tattoo and an embroidered coat stood silent in Lester's cafe, until a child's sketch and a widow's photograph gave them meaning. It was small gestures of empathy that turned early mockery into a shared legacy of honor. In the end, the deepest tributes are not shouted, they are witnessed, remembered, and carried forward in the hearts of those who choose to see.